What does Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 hide off camera throughout the sewers, wastewater plant, and no man's land? Chapter 4 is quite long, and throughout this chapter there are plenty of things you cannot see. From out-of-bounds objects to slow-motion animations, we'll be combing through it all. We're also going to be breaking some things along the way, and also covering funny instances of things that were already broken to begin with. Like taking a look at Yarnaby's really glitchy death sequence. With that said, I hope you guys enjoy this behind-the-scenes look of Chapter 4. As always, I usually hit you guys with a quick recap so everyone knows the sequence of events that take place throughout the game. So we've just got done talking to Doey, as our new objective is find and defeat the Doctor. Leaving Safe Haven, we'll make our way through this wormhole-like tunnel and into the sewers. We'll then pass a grid on the wall, where we can hear Doey and Poppy talking about what's best for everyone, as they both appear to have different thoughts on that. That can't be good. After figuring out the way to go, we'll want to take this elevator up to progress. This will lead us into a room with a vat of a green substance where we can find a collectible and a videotape here. This follows with a big open cave-like area as we get a static-filled call from Ollie. There are a couple of carts on the tracks here that we need to move in order to activate them. This in turn will allow us to thread our powered-up arm through the energy poles, hence unlocking the door, allowing us to progress. Pushing on, we'll come to a drop-off here as we use the chain hanging from above to safely swing across. Approaching these two doors, we can see that one needs power, as the other one appears to be the answer to said power. So once we slap our hands on these panels and activate it, mistakes were made apparently, as we've granted Yarnaby access to our flesh. Don't look back like I did my first time around though, because it could be a fatal mistake. However, getting through this door follows with us sliding down to temporary safety. Let's go back and take another look at all of this though. Starting off, I went ahead and brightened up the view and immediately zoomed out to take a broad look at everything. We can see Safe Haven is still loaded in, but what caught my eye was the tunnel that connects it to the sewers. There is a giant gap between the ends of the tunnel. This is because when we're normally going through it, it acts as a loading point, with the player unknowingly teleporting to the other half of the tunnel. This would explain why our hands disappear in this section, as warping with a grab pack activated would probably cause problems. While flying around, we can see how they use a projected image on a curved surface that is tethered to the camera's rotation, creating the visual we typically get when we walk through the tunnel. I will say it's odd that the image for when the player goes back up the tunnel also had the out-of-bounds portions baked into it, as in you can see the building sections you shouldn't be able to. Anyways, if we fly away while we listen to Doey and Poppy talk, it has the same results as if we walked away as a player. The dialogue will just fade and cease to continue. Not to mention, we can see that Doey is still trying to figure out these gauges up above. But after checking out my hands as I cycle through them, I managed to find my way through and into one of these blocked tunnels. However, it was met with immediate failure, as I unsurprisingly fell through the map. Coming over here, in this area, you won't fall forever, as you can see a death barrier here contained within these red lines. There is a giant image out here of a big open cave, which is used for when we look through this particular area in the sewer, consisting of 2 layers. Similar to what we've seen at the start of the game. It was definitely glitching out for me while I was observing it. Even during my first playthrough without hacks, it still seemed to be having issues, as it will load in and out sporadically while trying to observe it. There isn't much else going on in this next area though. However, coming over here, we can squeeze under these boards and venture back further. It'll lead to a dead end where we can observe a bunch of small rocks floating in the void, along with an elevator shaft, which if we go down into, leads nowhere, as we're now stuck. Quite the view the player would get if they manage to get over here though. Moving on, I managed to skip this puzzle by just getting far enough under the door before falling into the great beyond, which activated the autosave. This then loads us back up on the other side of the door. Reaching this point will now unload Safe Haven, as we can see Doey at this pipe now waiting for our arrival. I found it funny though, because on the other side of the door here, that we initially can't open as we progress, is where Doey is at. Is he purposely ignoring us? Seems kinda sus. Swinging over from this chain above, we can see Yarnaby loaded in as he waits for us to open the door. We can get another good look inside his mouth, revealing that he must have one heck of a dental plan. When he engages us, he'll give a treacherous scream, as he then pursues us, presenting both sets of his terrifying teeth. We can see while in slow motion, during the death animation with Yarnaby, he'll paw at us as he turns the player's hands around. He'll give us a moment of hope as he happily stares at us, only to quickly reveal that we're his next meal. However, if we go small boy mode when releasing this beast, we can run over here and hide just out of bounds, as we're able to squeeze in out here given our size. This results with Yarnaby not having the slightest idea where we are, as he'll patrol the area until we come out. So once I was done hiding, I gave Yarnaby the small snack that I am, and reset the instance. Something I realized here was that if we increase our size, this will allow us to use the chain we had swung across from before. This highly upsets Yarnaby, as he'll see us over here and pursue us. He'll just stop at the cliff though, unable to do anything about the predicament. I did notice, however, that Yarnaby began glitching out when he spawned in during another instance, as I slipped into this door and hung out on the edge here. He appears to be having a seizure, as another Yarnaby appears, being the one that we normally see first, as it swipes through the opening of the door. I'm not sure how I did it, but I broke him during another instance while he spawned in. The other half of his face was not where it's supposed to be, making for an even more horrific scene. However, once he makes his way out of the doors, we'll see that he'll readjust, snapping his face back into place. Once we make our escape through this other door, Yarnaby will teleport right to it, as he abruptly disengages and speeds off before disappearing. I actually noticed this during my first playthrough, which was interesting. But let's continue on as we normally would. Don't want to keep Doey waiting. We're hit with a new objective now, as we need to find a way out of no man's land. We need to power on this contraption, which in turn allows us to access this room, where a key card that we need is located. Grabbing this will cause Yarnaby to show up, which can turn fatal rather quickly. However, if we do this entire sequence fast, you'll be able to evade Yarnaby with no issues. We're now on a conveyor belt that leads us into the next section, as we need to swing across to safety so we don't get ground up. This part is going to involve similar electrical puzzles like the one we had just done. Yarnaby will be lurking around during this. Well, maybe. That is if you ended up not being one of the many that encountered a glitch that made this whole puzzle Yarnaby-less. Lots of people who played this on launch had no threat in this entire section, which was very strange. Anyways, you'll need to find multiple hand scanners that we need to use in order to proceed. We'll do this in this particular section, then have to come back out from where we came and find a door that requires a lever. Once acquiring the lever, we can open this door and we'll power up another station within, along with grabbing this keycard. This follows with having to figure out how to power up the required stations that in the end grant us passage to the next area. The door will shut behind us once achieving this, but as soon as we open this next door, Yarnaby will be right behind us, as we now need to run for our life. A chase begins that eventually leads to a jump, as we swing across this chain from above. I was definitely panicking during my first run with this, and frantically tried to open the next door. However, Yarnaby bites off more than he can chew here, as he gets hung up on the chain we just swung across, and begins to burn, ultimately falling to his death. With that though, let's go back once again, and see what takes place outside of normal gameplay. So after sliding down and escaping Yarnaby, I took the camera for a spin to check out the next area we're about to go into. But there wasn't much to see. Grabbing this keycard next to this poor little soul, we can see Yarnaby move very quickly on screen, as we see him crawl out. I'm not sure what happened here, but I was expecting him to come over like he normally does and continue patrolling the area. There was no sign of him though, so I went ahead and checked and could see he was just standing there, as he scared me back into this cubby. It turned out that he was stuck though, and could not pursue me, even while teasing him with my hands and flares. Thinking it was an isolated incident, I restarted the instance and grabbed the keycard again. But nope, he wasn't budging. He clearly wanted blood, as I kept popping him with flares, but I was safe, so I simply carried on. Making our way down this motionless conveyor belt, you'll be able to see the few boulders in front of us that end up getting broken up into this large machine. However, I made my way back to that Yarnaby, who ended up breaking out of his slumber-like state as he was patrolling that area once again. His head was placed on the body in a strange manner again, with the mouth opened up in a locked state. He'll linger here until we get to the next starting point of the following puzzle, which is once we pull this lever, as the electric slides once coming out of the vent-like compartment. He'll use these areas to get around this map more quickly, as they are scared about this puzzle. While retreating into one, we can see how he'll squeeze in and sit there for a brief moment before teleporting to another one, where he'll come out as we saw before. I noticed that these hiding spots that we can use aren't 100% guaranteed safety, as he'll just know where you are and eventually kill you, despite not making a sound, etc. I'm pretty sure that's unintended, and it's a bit frustrating. Aside from that though, not much else takes place here, so let's bypass the exit. Once completing the puzzle, we'll open this door, which ends up triggering the chase scene we have with Yarnaby. So instead of running as we normally would, I decided to turn small and hide, so we can see how he reacts. Turns out though that the chase scene Yarnaby is just a copy, as the other one, that we've been evading from before, continues his patrols. This Yarnaby will begin chasing though, despite the fact that we're not there. He'll go all the way up until the jump, which ends up being his fatal mistake. However, he'll just stop and stand there in a creepy, motionless state. Meanwhile, I'm back here with the other Yarnaby, as I think fast and run my tiny butt away from him. This one isn't able to get too far, with it being unable to pass this point. What I thought was odd with all of this is that if we play this part out normally, you can actually see that there are two Yarnabys behind you as this chase begins. I have no idea why the developers didn't anticipate this would happen by deactivating the roaming version, seeing as Yarnaby chasing you into this area could be a common occurrence, so he'd still be outside? Proceeding forward, we can sneak up on this Yarnaby, who I initially thought was broken and harmless, but the joke was on me, as I get jump scared. Moving on, watching Yarnaby in slow motion during this death scene is a trip. He'll flail all about in a wild manner, making for an intense scene. Of course, we're not going to see the full visual effects here, given the mode we're currently spectating in, but it's all the same, aside from seeing him engulfed in flames, as you can see here. This death is also weird. I don't think I really understood what was happening the first time. Anyways, you can see the hook struggling to keep up as I was observing this, but that's probably because of the game's speed being messed with throughout this sequence. I'll have to say though, my favorite part is watching him fall further down as his arm stretches for days. He is hanging on for dear life and refusing to let go. He'll proceed to fall all the way through the map as he comes to a stop quite a ways down below. He looks like a giant ember floating down here. His model material will change back to normal shortly after though. He'll just rest in peace down here indefinitely, as he is no longer a problem anymore. Let's push on as we normally would though, shall we? Yarnaby is toast, and now we're going to make our way into this capsule-like elevator as it will take us into a new area. Pushing on has us meet up with Doey. He'll go on about how he was gathering parts for the generator, but then is cut off as the pipe next to him bursts. This ends up tragically freezing him, but there is a lever right above us, which allows us to shut off the pipe. Doey will then thaw out and limp away in a disgruntled manner, cleverly foreshadowing his weakness. Walking out the door, our objective will update as we're tasked with making our way to the doctor. Realizing we're back in this area that we were in before, we'll swing across and head this way where Yarnaby had come out from before. The doctor will start talking to us once we reach this point, as we need to move these blocks over so we can hop on them to progress. We then encounter quite a few of these cooling pipes that are leaking. The cold gas coming from these pipes will slowly but surely hurt the player, so we need to find the levers and shut them off accordingly. This will allow us to access the canopy that has the key card inside, which will allow us to progress. Using the card will then open this door. This will bring us to a cold storage operating room of some sort, where we'll end up getting our blue hand stuck on a scanner, as the doctor activates a pipe to freeze our hand in place. The room will begin to get colder and colder as time passes, prompting the player to find a solution quickly. In Cold Storage Unit 2, we'll find a battery that we can then place in this saw up here. I initially thought I was supposed to cut my arm off that was stuck, but that wasn't the case. After nearly dying, I realized we need to pull the saw over, which will cut this cord, allowing us to pick up this blue hand that was attached to it. You'll then use this new hand to solve the room. With the doctor out of the way for now, we can progress through here, where we'll see a spotlight. Let's go back though and take a look at things from a different perspective. So we just torched Yarnaby, but I forgot to mention before that, if we go into big boy mode here, we can swing back and, well, get stuck out of bounds actually. However, after readjusting my size, we'll fall back down safely. This allows me to backtrack, which leads us to finding the Yarnaby that was once roaming this area, who is now frozen in place. I'd like to pretend that this is Yarnaby's spirit resting in peace, as he appears to be calm with that cute smile. But that's wishful thinking, of course. I was able to play dentist with him though, and I got my hands all up in his mouth throat thingy, making for an awkward time. I moved on at this point as I got into this capsule that takes us to the next area. We can see that it actually just teleports us. This tracks because when we normally do this part, you'll notice the screen fades to black briefly, as we hear the capsule shooting off, creating the illusion that we used it. I messed up though while tinkering with the game. This resulted with us being in the capsule, which had already teleported, leaving me stuck in here until I reloaded again. Wait, why do I hear boss music? I don't know why, but when reloading at this point, the chase music began playing once again. Take a listen. Unsurprised at this point, we can see that Yarnaby is back frozen in place. Continuing on though, the chase music never stopped playing, even when reaching Doey, as I figured it would have stopped. I can't imagine going through this scene normally, barely being able to hear the dialogue. I do have to say though, watching Doey get frozen in slow motion is extra sad. You can see how the model's material will eventually change in set intervals on Doey, perhaps with a mask, giving the frozen appearance that we normally see. Whereas when he thaws, we can see at the same speed that it's a more smooth transition. Overall looking pretty, chill. There was something else I noticed though. Doey will freeze again once the door shuts behind us. I don't know exactly why this takes place, but it did lead me to finding his teeth, which can be found stored inside his head, as you can see. They too have the frozen appearance, like the rest of his model. That must be one heck of a brain freeze, but let's carry on. As I progressed with a new objective, I couldn't take it anymore and tried restarting the checkpoint in an attempt to get rid of the chase music. Thinking this would resolve the issue, confusion set in even further, as not only did the music not stop, but the objective changed to run. So instead of running, this prompted me to go behind the scenes and seek out any potential reason for this to be happening. I did end up coming across the Yarnaby from the section before, who was just wandering about. However, when I went back to where he got eliminated, I discovered a Yarnapede scenario taking place. Didn't expect to find this, but here you go. It appears I'm stuck with the chase music forever. Anyways, it was here that I noticed an opening in the wall where I believed I could see out of bounds. Going in closer confirms it, as I was in fact seeing another section of the level through this wall. I went back to the normal view to see if it made a difference, but I definitely could still see out there. Moving on though, the part where we need to turn off the cold gas pipes seems a bit silly. I realized that I could just slowly push through the Arctic blast and safely get in here to get the keycard. The amount of freezing it does to the player is very minimal, which follows with the player being able to do the same thing as we exit this area. So you don't need to deactivate anything at all. Mr. Freeze would be proud. Coming into the next area, where our hand ends up getting frozen to a scanner, doesn't have much going on outside of normal gameplay either. However, as many others have, I did notice the Blue Hand's glitchy arm that's just floating up here. It's safe to speculate that this should have been connected to the body that's in a bag up here, the one that has a mask on and a grab pack. I think this ultimately confused about every player, as they assumed this Blue Hand was a glitched version of their own, because its origin was nothing. Moving on would lead us to the maze area, where we have to navigate through the red gas and whatnot, but we can slip under this door and use the sky lift prematurely. We get the full ride, just like if we're taking it when we're supposed to. This does reveal portions of the map unloaded along the way, which is unsurprising of course. We'll reach the end of the ride though, and get a checkpoint, basically bypassing the whole next section, including the doctor fight, but failing to get the Omni Hand. Whoops. And with that, that's everything I found hidden in the sewers, wastewater plant, and no man's land. I hope you enjoyed this glitch-filled extravaganza, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers!